Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. My name is Ye Ruoling, and I'm currently pursuing a master's degree in music education at Raffles Music College. Today, I'm excited to share with you my research on how teacher feedback impacts student confidence in beginner piano education. So, my topic is exploring the impact of teacher feedback on student confidence in beginner piano education. When I was around 6 or 7, I remember one particular piano lesson that changed how I felt about music. I had been practicing a short piece all week, and I thought I was doing quite well. But the moment I sat down at the piano and began playing, my teacher frowned and said sharply, "Run again." She didn't raise her voice, but the cold tone and disappointed look on her face made me feel like I had failed completely. I still remember how I stopped mid phrase, my hands trembling above the keys. I didn't want to continue. A year later, I started with a different teacher in our very first lesson. I played the same piece, still not perfect, but she smiled and said, "You've got the rhythm right. Now let's work on the left hand together." Her tone was calm, encouraged me, and made me feel safe. I wasn't afraid to try anymore. That was the moment I realized feedback is not just about correcting, it's about connecting. Now, as a music teacher myself, I've seen the same thing in my own students. When I give Vogue praise like "good job," students smile politely. But when I say something specific like "your staccato is getting cleaner," that's growth. That's progress. Sorry, they light up. That expression, that confidence is exactly what led me to this research. Later, when I began teaching in a private music institution in China, most of my students were primary school children. I remembered my own experiences vividly, how much feedback had affected my motivation as a child. So I made a conscious decision to always lead with encouragement and patience, even with students who others found difficult, perhaps shy, distracted, or prone to mistakes. I would slow down and say things like, "That's great effort," or "Let's try that one more time together." I saw over and over again that when a child feels safe and respected, they learn better. Over time, many of my students not only improved in their playing, but developed a genuine love for music. Some would even run into the classroom excited, eager to show me that they practiced. That connection built through positive, constructive feedback is the reason why my students often say they like learning with me. And that's also why I believe feedback is not just a teaching technique, it's a relationship. So now it's going to the third page. After witnessing how students respond to different tones and styles of feedback, both as student and as a teacher, I began to wonder what exactly makes feedback effective in music education. My central research question became, how does teacher feedback influence student confidence in beginner piano education? This question is especially relevant because beginner students are in a very sensitive phase. Their technical foundation is still forming, but more importantly, their emotional response to learning is fragile. One poorly timed or over crucial comment can damage their confidence. On the other hand, the right kind of encouragement can ignite their motivation. So, I designed several sub questions to support this inquiry. What types of feedback? Positive, creation, corrective, or constructive are most effective for building student confidence? How do students emotionally interpret the feedback they receive? What role does together tone, clarity, and emotional consistency play in the feedback process? Can feedback strategies prevent early dropout or frustration in beginner students? In essence, this research aims not just to define good feedback, but to understand how feedback can become a tool for emotional development, and long-term music engagement. To answer my research question, I decided to adopt a mixed methods research design. Why mixed methods? Because I didn't just want to collect numbers, I also want to hear voice and observe real life reactions. Quantitatively, I designed a Likert scale questionnaire and distributed it to 80 beginner piano students between the age of 6 and 12. The questionnaire asked them how they feel after receiving different types of teacher feedback, whether it made them more motivated, more nervous, or more confused. I also included items related to their willingness to practice and continue learning. Qualitatively, I interviewed 10 piano teachers with varying levels of experience. I asked them how they typically give feedback, how they adjust their language depending on the student, and how they see confidence being built or damaged during lessons. The interviews were semi-structured, allowing teachers to speak freely. In addition, I conducted non-participant classroom observations in 5 beginner-level piano classes. I sat in the back and recorded how teachers gave feedback, what words they used, what tone, and how students responded non-verbally. Some students smiled and straightened up after positive feedback. Others avoided eye contact when criticized. These three tools, survey, interview, and observation, together provided a more complete picture. I could see patterns not just in what people said, but in how they actually behaved. This triangulation helped strengthen the reliability of the research. Every research Every research method has its strengths and limitations, and mine is no exception. One of the main strengths of this project is that it to use a mixed methods approach. My combination surveys, interviews, and classroom observations, I was able to review the topic from multiple angles. This triangulations make the data more reliable and gives a fuller picture of how feedback works emotionally, cognitively, and behaviorally. Another strength is that the research is grounded in real classroom settings. The observation I did were not simulated or artificial. They involved real teachers and real students in their natural learning environments. This adds ecological validity and makes the finding more applicable to real-world teaching. Moreover, this project gives voice to both students and teachers. Many students only focus on one side, but in this case, we hear that students feel and also what teachers intend. This helps us understand not only what happens, but why it happens. However, I also recognize several limitations. First, the small size is relatively small, only 80 students and 10 teachers. This limits how broadly we can apply the findings. Second, there may be self-reporting bias in the questionnaire, especially among younger students. Some may respond based on what they think the teacher wants to hear. Third, because all the participants were from similar cultural contexts, Chinese speaking or Singaporean classrooms, cross-cultural generalizability is limited. Students from Western contexts may respond to feedback in different ways. Finally, even though I try to be as neutral as possible, teachers may have acted differently knowing someone was watching. In future research, I plan to address these limitations by expanding the sample, refining the instruments, and including a more deserved demographic. In reviewing the existing literature, I found that the topic of teacher feedback has been studied from several key perspectives, each of which informed a different layer of my research. First, we have the theoretical foundation. The most influential model is from Hattie Timberley 2007. who introduced a framework of 3 core questions: where am I going, how am I going, and what's next, and 4 levels of feedback: task, process, self-regulation, and self. This process level tends to support student confidence more than praise or blames directed at example. McFrozen, Renwick, 2001, examined how feedback and goal setting influence children's feedback tend to practice more and stay committed together. Third, emotional factors were often emphasized. Gasper, 2020, in a study on music performances teaching, found that the emotional tone of teacher feedback, such as whether it sounds harsh or with my observations, that many beginner students are especially sensitive to tone. Fourth, some researchers focus specifically on piano pedagogy. Daniel Brandon, 2013, studied intermediate level piano students and discovered that unclear or misleading teacher feedback often leads to discouragement and even dropout. Although my research is focused on beginners, this finding systems, feedback frameworks, motivation, emotional response, and piano-specific studies have shaped the direction of my research and helped me frame both the problem and the solution. On this slide, I've listed 6 key sources from my literature review. Each was selected not only for its relevance to teacher feedback or student confidence, but also for the variety of research methods they respond. This range helps me complete how different approaches study similar problems. Let me walk you through a few examples. Haiti Temperley 2007 is a theoretical paper. It doesn't involve data collection, but it provides a conceptual framework for how feedback works through 3 guiding questions and 4 feedback levels. This model is the foundation of my feedback categorization. Then we have Daniel Brandon, a collaborative study that interviewed piano teachers about dropout rates during the intermediate stage. John Nasri used a mixed methods approach, combining students' surveys and teacher interviews to understand guidance strategies. Wei, 2021, conducted an experimental study to test how immediate versus delayed feedback affects beginner performance. Gasper did a ethnographic classroom study observing real-time teacher-student interactions in music lessons. Finally, Huang, 2021, conducted a quantitative survey study on musical confidence. Together, these 6 sources helped me shape not only my research questions, but also my methods and analytical framework. I will now give a short explanation of each of the documents in this table. This is Foundation's theoretical paper. It introduces a model of 3 key questions and 4 feedback levels. It helps me categorize feedback types in my now analyze. As part of this research, I conducted a small-scale pilot study involving real beginner piano classrooms. The goal was not to produce final results, but to observe patterns and test the tools I had designed. One of the most striking patterns I observed was the emotional sensitivity of young students to teacher tone and wording. In one lesson, I saw a student freeze completely when a teacher said, "No, that's wrong, start again." He didn't respond immediately. His hand stayed on the keys, but his body slouched. In contrast, in other class, when the teacher said, "That was a good attempt, let's fix the second bar together," the student smiled and started correcting himself instantly. From the student surveys, about 85% of respondents said they felt more confidence when a teacher gave specific phrases such as, "Your rhythm is stable," or "great improvement in the left hand." However, around 60 said that unclear or negative tone made them anxious or unwilling to ask questions. Teachers' interviews supported these trends. Some teachers admitted that they sometimes gave vague praise like "good job" just to move the lesson along, but many also acknowledged that when they gave feedback with more emotional clarity and musical detail, students participated more actively and returned the following week with visible improvement. Although this was only a preliminary investigation. It gave me strong evidence that feedback style, both in content and in tone, has immediate effects on beginner students' emotion engagement and the willingness to learning. Like any research project, mine has both strengths and limitations. Let's start with the strengths. First, I use a mixed methods approach that includes surveys, interviews, and classroom observations. This allows me to collect both quantitative and quantitative data, which help validate the results through triangulations. I wasn't relying on just number or just options. I looked at both. Second, the research is grounded in real classroom settings, not lab-based simulations. The observations I conducted were in live piano classes, so what I recorded reflects authentic teacher-student interactions. Third, I include both teacher and student voices. This is important because feedback is a two-way process. It's not just what the teacher says, but how the student hears and interprets it. By collecting perspective from both sides, I gained a more balanced understanding. Now, the limitations. First, the sample size is relatively small, 80 students and 10 teachers. That makes it difficult to generalize these results to larger populations. Second, because my participants are most from Chinese or Singaporean classrooms, there may be cultural bias in how feedback is given and received. And finally, the observed effect is a challenge. Even though I stayed silent during classroom observations, teachers and students may have acted differently just because someone was watching. Overall, these strengths and limitations help guide how I interpret my data and what future improvements I plan to make. Although this is still an ongoing research project, my preliminary data and field experience allow me to present some hypothetical results, trends that are highly likely based on what I've observed. First, from student questionnaires, about 85 of students reported feeling more confidence when they received the specific constructive feedback. Phrases like your rhythm is much better today. Overall, my early data strongly suggests that how feedback is given, what is said, how it's said, and when it's said directly impacts beginner students' confidence, focus, and motivations to continue learning. These insights provide practical guidance for improving teaching practice in early music education. Looking ahead, there are several directions in which I would like to spend this research, not only academically, but also in terms of practical application in music classroom. To conclude, I believe teacher feedback is more than just a comment during a lesson. It's a mirror of how we see our students and how we help them see themselves. My research shows that even small changes in how we phrase our words, how we deliver encouragement, and how we respond to mistakes can have a powerful emotional impact, especially for beginner students. I hope this study contributes to a growing awareness that music education is not just technical, but deeply emotional and relational. Thank you so much for your time and attention. I'd now love to hear your thoughts, feedback, or any questions you may have. Let's open the floor for discussion. And the last two pages is my annotated by bibliography. And this two is the references. Thank you for your watching. Thank you.